President Trump has said all options are on the table after North Korea fired a missile over Japan. So what could military action against Kim Jong-un's regime actually look like, as a ballistic missile passed over the Japanese island of Hokkaido? Residents were warned to take cover. The launch was a provocative act, which has been followed by warnings from the North Korean regime that it was just a first step. The UN and several nations have imposed sanctions on North Korea, while President Trump said he was considering the next steps. But while the U.S. has unrivaled military strength, the range of options it actually has against the hermit country are limited. Option 1. Enhanced containment. This is the least risky but arguably least effective option available, since it would simply build on deployments that have long been in place and have had little success in deterring North Korea's ballistic missile and nuclear program. The U.S. could move additional ground forces into South Korea, including ground-based missile defenses such as the controversial THAAD system, heavy artillery and armored vehicles, to demonstrate its willingness to use force to back up its demands. However, South Korea has halted the current THAAD deployment and is strongly against any increases in U.S. ground forces because of concerns about provoking the North. Indeed, North Korea would almost certainly interpret such moves as a prelude to a ground invasion, given its reactions to annual joint exercises between the U.S. and South Korean militaries. China and Russia would no doubt strenuously object to, and both have the power to make life difficult for the U.S. in other areas, such as Eastern Europe and the South and East China Seas. The U.S. Navy could increase its presence around Korea, sending more cruisers and destroyers able to shoot down ballistic missiles, and possibly deploying a second carrier strike group. Alongside the naval options, the U.S. Air Force could bolster its forward-based air power with more attack fighter squadrons, support tankers, surveillance aircraft and heavy bombers at bases in Guam, South Korea itself and Japan. However, the U.S. Navy and U.S. Air Force are both extremely heavily tasked around the world, and are feeling the strain of well over a decade of continuous high-intensity deployments in support of operations, including those in Iraq and Afghanistan. More importantly, perhaps, time is on North Korea's side, since an enhanced U.S. military presence would not itself force a halt to its rapidly maturing nuclear weapons program and ballistic missile testing, and any statement of intent to shoot down North Korean ballistic missiles which travel outside the country's airspace would itself require a major increase in U.S. Navy presence around the peninsula. North Korea has a large ballistic missile arsenal, and U.S. interceptor missiles are extremely expensive and available in limited quantities aboard each ship. It would, therefore, be possible for the North to overwhelm and deplete the U.S. Navy's stocks, leaving them vulnerable and forced to return to port. Such a policy would therefore represent an extremely expensive and probably unsustainable challenge to North Korea, as well as a dangerous escalation towards direct military conflict. Option 2. Surgical strikes. The U.S. Air Force and U.S. Navy possess the most advanced surgical strike capabilities on Earth, using volleys of precision Tomahawk missiles fired from submarines off the North Korean coastline and attacks by B-2 stealth bombers against key North Korean nuclear sites and ballistic missile facilities may seem like an attractive proposition at first glance. It is undoubtedly the case that heavy damage could be inflicted on high-value targets with deeply buried and hardened underground facilities vulnerable to the 30,000-pound massive ordnance penetrator bomb. The immediate danger to U.S. aircraft would depend on many factors, including the amount of warning North Korea received the number of strikes flown and the contribution of non-stealth aircraft within range of its defenses. However, the state of North Korea's air defense network is very hard to determine since it is a mix of Soviet, Russian, Chinese and homegrown surface-to-air missile and radar systems acquired over 50 years. The defenses are among the densest on Earth, but they have been modified and upgraded to an unknown degree, and their readiness is difficult to assess. If the U.S. lost aircraft to enemy fire or accidents, it would then face the nightmare scenario of having to try to rescue its aircrew, or abandon them to a very public fate. Far more significant, however, is the fact that even successful strikes on nuclear and missile sites, command centers, and even the leadership itself would not stop North Korea retaliating. The People's Army would still have the ability to inflict almost inevitably devastating damage in immediate retaliation against South Korea, a key U.S. ally. It consists of over 1 million regular soldiers and, by some estimates, over 6 million reserves and paramilitary troops, a huge number of conventional and rocket artillery pieces, mostly dug in near the demilitarized zone, include hundreds which are within range of parts of the South Korean capital city Seoul, which is home to around 10 million people. Even the U.S. military would take days to fully eliminate just these artillery batteries, which would be able to fire tens of thousands of shells and rockets during that time. The catastrophic damage that these batteries would inflict on a crowded modern city, as well as the South Korean military forces, is why the South Korean government is opposed to any preemptive military action against North Korea, even without a usable nuclear weapon and without actively invading South Korea. The Kim regime could inflict devastating damage and probably end the U.S.-South Korean alliance as we know it.